Okay, we're live.
All right, great. I'd like to call to order the February 17th meeting of the Chagrin Falls Board of Education. Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin.
Here.
Mrs. Garvey.
Here.
Mrs. Brose.
Here.
Mr. Kanzinger.
Here.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Here.
How did I lose the flag? Well, I'm sorry. If you all wouldn't mind joining me in standing for the Pledge of Allegiance, find your local flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, thank you very much. I believe next. So, Mrs. O'Toole, do you have any committee reports for audit and board policy?
No reports this evening.
Okay, and Mrs. Garvey for business advisory, capital planning, and board finance and budget.
I also have no reports this evening.
Okay, it's a clean sweep. No report for records retention. Is that fast enough, Bob? So 6 minutes, 6:03. I'll turn the meeting over to you.
Wow, I was not ready to get to my mute button that quickly. That is. Thank you and good evening. Couple of reports this evening. As we've kind of hit mid-year, a little bit past of it, we annually update the Board of Education on district goals. Typically, there's one kind of high-level data goal that we share out on. It looks a little bit different this year due to no testing being administered last year. And then the other goal is the work around DEIJ. And tonight I asked Dr. Amanda Cooper, who is partnered with us from the Diversity Center, to give the Board of Education just an update on the work, as she's done a lot of the facilitation. I know Sharon kind of joined the group a little bit late, and Catherine's been in most of it, representing the school board, but wanted to give the full board an update and let you ask any questions that you might have. And I just want to be respectful. Amanda was nice enough to jump on here, but I know she also has a 6:30 meeting with another school board that she has to present at. So I want to be respectful of that. So I'm going to turn it over to you, to Dr. Cooper, and then certainly if you have questions along the way, please feel free to jump in and ask those.
Excellent. Thanks so much. Bear with me just 1 second while I share my screen and get this all pulled up. All right, there we go. Okay, so thank you all for the invitation to join you. Again, my name's Amanda, and I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Diversity Center of Northeast Ohio. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm going to review the status and progress of the district's DEIJ task force with you tonight. So the process that we're using for the task force is appreciative inquiry, which is really a world-renowned method for strategic planning that originated right here in our backyard at Case Western Reserve University. And the model makes use of a 5D process that starts with define, where you identify and describe the scope of your project. Next is discovery, where you identify what's already working well within a system and engage stakeholders in an appreciation of the strengths. The next section is dream, where you imagine what could be and engage the group in a visioning process together for the future. Then you move into the design phase, where you develop a plan for how you can reach the dream. And then finally, we have destiny, which centers on implementation. This is a monthly look at our progress thus far. Following our contracting and kickoff session in September and October, we began with the define stage in November. We focused the bulk of December on the discovery stage. Dream was the primary stage for January. February and March will focus on the design stage, and then we'll begin shifting towards destiny, which is more of the implementation stage. I'm going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the work within each of those stages now. So our contracting, planning, and kickoff session included the design of the task force in general and also an invitation and selection of the co-chairs. We were really overwhelmed by the response to the invitation for individuals to apply to be co-chairs and ended up having to lead a parent and student group specifically through the process of their selecting the co-chairs for their subcommittees, as there were so many applicants that wanted to lead that process with those groups. We also held a kickoff session to review the task force with the community. This task force has 4 active stakeholder groups, and it includes 3 meetings per month. The first is our general task force meeting. The second is the steering committee meeting, where the co-chairs learn to lead the work that's going to happen in their subcommittees. And the third is the subcommittee meetings. Each person that's fully participating in this is highly engaged and making really incredible contributions to the future of diversity and inclusion in the district. And we at the Diversity Center are really proud of being a part of that process too. So as stated, the define stage includes coming up with the scope of this work, and that's centered on the development of our affirmative topic, which is listed here. As you'll notice, the affirmative topic and focus is really grounded within the values and mission of the district, which embraces diversity and strives to provide an educational experience that is empowering to all students. This work recognizes that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice are keys to that vision. And it also includes what we'll accomplish together, which is the development of a shared vision, an understanding of the needs of our community, and then the creation of an action plan. During this stage, the co-chairs were also onboarded, where we were able to review expectations with them, data storage, tips for facilitating group discussions and also building community within their subcommittees, and then also an overview of appreciative inquiry. Next, we have the discovery stage, and the purpose of this is to really engage the group in discovering and recognizing the positive forces that make your city a really exceptional place to work and learn. So within their subcommittees, they completed several different activities and discussions, including one centered on high point experiences, where they were asked to tell a story of a high point experience for diversity within the district, or a time that they felt valued and proud of the district in relation to diversity. We asked them to engage in a dialogue around what about the district and community made this experience possible, and for them to think about that in terms of people, different policies, or practices that happen. We also engaged them in discussions of core strengths and values that exist for the community. And as a group, they summarized what the positive forces that already exist within the district, what makes the district special, and they described all of these things in terms of qualities, values, and practices. So one example of that they came up with for this was the Tiger Perks program, which was referenced by many of the different groups as something that's going really well for the district in relation to diversity. The next part of the discovery process includes taking what we've learned about what works well and then analyzing why it works well and what made that program or initiative successful. And then we'll use that to develop design criteria. So design criteria really serve as a checklist that we can use to assess any proposed efforts or initiatives that come up in the design stage. So for example, one of the design criteria that's being proposed to the subcommittees currently is that future efforts will engage and also be supported by more than one stakeholder group. So it's not just going to be something that's just supported by students or just supported by parents or just supported by community or school leadership. It'll involve at least 2 of those stakeholder groups. And that's really based in the understanding that efforts that they've discovered that have been really successful in the past have met this criteria already. So if approved as a primary design criteria, they will check any new ideas against this. And if an idea or an initiative does not engage more than one stakeholder group, then they'll work to see if there's anything that they can do to improve it and add that as a component, as this in turn should increase the likelihood that it will be successful. So the next stage is the dream stage, and the purpose of this is to engage all of the stakeholder groups in a visioning process for diversity in the district. And they engaged in a lot of different activities here as well, including a discussion of 3 different wishes, where they were asked if they could change the school district or community, what 3 wishes would they request to ensure diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice for generations to come. They also engaged in discussions of their visions for the future, where they were to imagine that tonight they fell into a deep and relaxing sleep, and when they woke up, it was the year 2026. And when they woke up, they noticed that something's different. Major changes have taken place within the district and community, and it's really now a national leader for diversity. So what does that look and feel like? What are people doing now? What's new and different at the school, and what changes have been made? So next, we focused on the development of vision statements, which are currently in progress. And those statements are things that highlight and define what our affirmative topic looks like when it's really at its best. And these vision statements are going to serve as the foundational elements for the design of actions and initiatives that the group is going to propose moving forward. So the stage that we just started and that we will be primarily focusing on this and next month is the design phase. And this stage has numerous activities that all feed into the development of a plan for how we can live into our dream and vision for the future. So we developed an organizational design model. Just going to admit someone really quickly. There we go. So we developed an organizational design model, which serves as a way to organize our data throughout this stage, which I'll share in just a moment. We're in the process of finalizing our design criteria and vision statements. This month within their stakeholder groups, they will also be identifying their group's areas of influence and agency. And this process serves to help all stakeholders see how and where they have the ability to really impact the most change within the school system. So it helps the groups to continue to see themselves as really a key part of any kind of change that occurs in the district, as opposed to thinking about this kind of work as just something that one group is responsible for moving forward. So for example, the student subcommittee may find that they have the most ability to influence the day-to-day experiences of other students, while not really being able to influence things like policies as easily, while the community and school leadership group may find that they have more influence and agency over things like policies and procedures. So following our completion of those different pieces, we'll move into learning about and using several different design tools, including an equity and inclusion framework, assessment plan, gap analysis, and then the action plan. So this is the organizational design model that I referenced, and this just serves as a way to help organize the information that we gather and during the design process. So at the center, you can see the mission and values of the district and community, and this really serves as the heart of this work and what everything else is grounded in. From our From our vision and our values, you'll see the next ring there has the DEIJ specific vision and dream, which is developed by each stakeholder group shown in the model. So you have your parents, community school leadership, educators, and the students there too. So from our vision and dream, we've summarized all of the different organizational design elements within the school system that are influenced and impacted by diversity. You can also really design initiatives, actions, or efforts for DEIJ that are all to these different areas. So for example, within the people category, you have the lived experiences of people and groups. So we know that diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice influences the experiences of people and groups within the district. And you can also design specific initiatives that address the unique needs of individuals and groups within the district as well. The outer ring there shows all the different levels of the culture and climate for diversity, which also needs to be monitored and accounted for in these kind of efforts too. So this is a visual for the design process. Again, you have the design model, which is a way to organize the data within this stage. We then have your areas of influence and agency, which will feed into our assessment plan. The assessment plan will include a look at what the current state and needs of the community are, and that'll be determined by the different stakeholder groups. The gap analysis then will call the group to really look at the vision that they've come up with, along with their assessment of the current state, and to analyze if there's a gap that exists between where they want to be and what their vision is with what it's really like within the district. If there is a gap between the vision and the current state, then the action plan serves to close the gap and allow us to fully move into that vision for the future for all of the groups and individuals in your community. The final stage is the destiny stage. And the start time and the contents of this will really be developed during the stage that we're in now, which is design. This stage focuses primarily on putting their action plan into action. And this will be primarily led by the groups themselves as they actually go out into the community and begin to put their plans to work. We are, of course, available to support you in these efforts moving forward in any way that would be of value or help to the group. We have a wealth of experience and tools that relate to different kinds of data collection and analysis methods, like the measurement of the culture and climate for diversity in schools or the facilitation of listening sessions. We also specialize in student programming and adult professional development centered on these topics as well. It's been an absolute honor to work with your stakeholder groups thus far, and we're really excited for what the future looks like for the district in relation to diversity. It's going to be very exciting. And I'd now like to open it up for any questions that anyone has.
Dr. Cooper, you and I have talked about focus groups, surveys, and things of that. Is that something that you need in the gap analysis stage to give you better data to identify the gaps, or is that something that falls more, in your opinion, on the action side of things, where you put that in as an action step to maybe start off this next phase?
So that's a great question. So the way that these tools are going to be designed is so that they can continue to be used over and over again, so that we can get moving throughout the rest of the process. We're going to ask the stakeholder groups to think about what their greatest priorities are for assessment, and for them to engage in a little bit of data collection and analysis themselves to help give them those experiences so that they can also carry this work on independently. When it comes to doing listening sessions, if the groups do decide to prioritize, hey, I'd really like to set up a listening session for the students of color and invite the students to come and share what their experiences are, they're welcome to lead those and host those, or if they would like, we can lead those for you all as well. We're of course available to do that this year, or if you would like to do something like that, next year and would like an external person to do that, we can certainly come in and support you in those efforts. We have found one of the greatest tools that you can assess quite a lot at once is our culture and climate surveys, which the way that we do those, we disaggregate the data by different demographic categories too, and we do a qualitative analysis of the data. So when you're looking at the disaggregation of the data, you can look at things like race, you can look at things like gender, and how if students feel like they're included and they belong at school, if they've ever wanted to stay home from school because they didn't want to be in conflict with others, or you can assess all of those and look at those by demographic categories, and then also analyze all of their qualitative comments, which when we've done those surveys, we find that they're really open with talking and providing feedback that way too. So that could be another potential option there.
Can I just ask a clarification of what the output of the design phase looks like? When we talk about planning what will be,
Mhm.
so for an example of systems or structures, are we saying in that stage we're going to identify policies and practices that are in conflict with the DEIJ vision? Or is that the stage where those policies and practices will be identified and we now know the changes that we'd like to implement? Or does that come in implementation? Like, I'm trying to understand, when is it we actually look at, when is the actual meat of the work as come into the diagram versus talking about when the meat of the work comes? I'm just confused because I joined late.
Oh, no, that's a really great question too. So let's say that you have some kind of a vision statement that says that you want to integrate an equity lens into everything that the school system's doing, or you have some kind of vision statement that relates to equity. It's likely that that is such an expansive thing that's going to require looking at all of your policies and procedures and doing some research on what your current state is in relation to having the integration of that versus where you want to be, that will span into an action plan, which is going to have some more immediate items, which is likely going to be to assess, well, where are you actually now? And then it'll have a lot of intermediate and long-term items too.
Okay.
So in some ways, they kind of loop around each other, the process does, but we want to provide the stakeholder group specifically with here's how you can think about doing this. Here's a tool that you can use for doing assessments, which is all going to be based on what they see as priorities as well. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, so we're really just, in all of these phases, we're really in the brainstorming to get to concrete vision statements, and then the work continues about how the changes that we need to align all our practices and policies with those vision statements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's bringing a lot of people to the table and building a lot of capacity and building a lot of buy-in and building a lot of hope for the future with the approach that this takes, and then empowering every single stakeholder group to continue the actions moving forward. And that's kind of like the foundation of this approach, as opposed to just having a couple of people come in and assess it directly. We find that when that happens, that's great and it provides a lot of great information, but then it's housed within just a couple of people to make the changes, and it usually falls apart over time. So in this way, you're letting everybody see themselves as part of it, and you're engaging everybody as part of it, and you're having people develop this vision of what they want the school district and the community to be like. And then you're going to have them think about, okay, well, what's it actually like now? Give people some skills for assessing that current state, and then create a sense of agency over, all right, well, what do we want to do to get there for our vision? This is what we see for our community. What steps can we take now together? And there'll be independent steps for like students, independent steps for parents, independent ones for educators, and then there'll be some collective ones too. So it's a longer, like more of a transformational process.
And it's great. We have tremendous engagement across all 4 of the categories, and just from participating in the one full task force meeting, I'm excited about the number of people that are eager to help move us forward in this process. So,
Right. Me too.
Any other questions?
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Bob.
No, go ahead, Catherine.
I was just going to ask her to give us a sense. We've talked about tremendous involvement, but of the numbers, and I know you've touched on some of the groups, but maybe you could go a little bit more into that.
With the number of people coming?
The number of people and you know what they're representing, where their experience, where they're coming from, to show that we have a really broad swath of participation.
So we have 9 co-chairs, and the co-chairs are really very active. So the attendance in the steering committee is very good, and they're all hosting and running their own subcommittee meetings in addition to coming to the general task force meetings as well. I think, and Dr. Hunt, correct me if I'm wrong, there's on average about 40 to 45 people that seem to come each time to the task force. And I see a lot of familiar faces. So there's probably a core 30 to 35. And then there's other people that are coming in and coming out. So as a whole, I would estimate there to be about 60 people that are pretty well engaged in the process with your like really core group of that's in the steering committee. From what I can tell, it's also people that are coming with a lot of different diverse backgrounds too, both in educational experiences to demographic categories to diverse identities and social groups. If it would be of value, we could send out like a little poll to capture some of that as well. But it's pretty active, and it's a pretty diverse and really wonderful group.
So I would just add, there's administration, board members, teachers, support staff, students, parents, graduates, community members. I think maybe that, did I miss any category? I mean, it really is a broad swath of our community, both those who are actively involved in the school district right now and some that aren't as actively involved, but have an experience having been a student here or having been a staff member here.
Yeah, I just had a parent reach out to me as well and saying that they're homeschooling and they've been homeschooling before the pandemic, but then they're considering coming, but they're a member of the community and they're wondering if they could still participate. And we're like, yes, please go ahead and join. So I think the word's spreading about it too, and we have a wide range of really everybody that's coming.
Dr. Cooper, I want to be respectful of your time, and I know you got to jump into another meeting here. I appreciate your leadership and assistance as we facilitated through this and really being a partner with us. The board as a deliverable should anticipate in June kind of that articulated vision statement with some actions that are recommended by this group. Maybe some of the low-hanging fruit, things we should do now, and then things that we need to chunk out over the next couple of years. But I appreciate the Diversity Center's partnership, and I appreciate very much the board's commitment to making this happen. So I think you had to jump off.
Great. Thank you all so much. It was wonderful to see you.
So the second district goal for this year is around academic achievement. We typically will identify things in the state report card and focus on those. Obviously, this is just one more thing that's a little bit different this year, and we've kind of based this on student growth and iReady data. And I know Becky and Jen have put a lot of slides together. I think it's more for the community that may want to dig into some of this. And I told them they had 10 minutes, but I think Dr. Cooper ran over, so I think you're down to like 6. But we're going to walk through kind of where we're at with that goal as our second benchmarking is done, where we're tracking, and then answer any questions that you have. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Quinn.
Can everyone see our screen? Are we okay? Thumbs up, thank you. Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here briefly this evening. The K-12 admin team collaborated with central office administrators to identify a systemic data goal for the 2021 school year. Tonight, we're going to give a mid-year progress update toward that goal. This was the goal that was shared with the board in the fall. As you recall, due to the stay-at-home order, the ODE assessments were not administered in spring of 2020. So spring 2019 is the most recent district data that we have from ODE testing. As you remember from the 18-19 school year, we had an A for our overall performance indicator for the district achievement component. We did not meet one indicator, which was an 8th grade math in the 18-19 school year.
The next two slides kind of walk you through projected proficiency on
the testing that would occur this coming spring. So if you look at this first slide, this takes us back to the fall benchmarking period, which was in September, and predicted the number of students who would be proficient on the test by the end of the year. Remember, you know, math is a little bit tricky based on how we program for kids and when we have kids taking tests above their grade level. So those numbers shift a little bit. These numbers were cleaned up so that we removed any kids that were taking above grade level tests on looking at these percentages. Becky, if you flip to the next one, here's our actual current predictions based on the winter benchmark assessment that was completed in the last 2 weeks of January. So again, in math, we're looking at, you know, 7th and 8th grade kind of being the areas of concern. But remember, 7th grade will be amplified by the 6th graders who take the test. And then 8th grade, we have just under 50% of our entire 8th grade class that take that 8th grade math test. So that's always the area that we have some concern about. Okay. The next several slides help us gauge what progress our students have made from fall to winter benchmarking. And as you look at these charts on the next couple of slides, the red colors indicate 2 grade levels below where we would expect them to be. The yellow is within a year, and the green is on target. So what we want to see as we move from fall to winter is we want to see a shift in colors. We want to see the red and yellow numbers go down, and we want to see the green bars go up. That tells us that we have more and more kids moving to on or above grade level. So this looks at the intermediate school. Here's the middle school. Middle school, again, kind of like the numbers we just looked at. We have a bigger pot of kids kind of in that middle section where we know that we need to target intervention and support as they progress through the year. Overall, all buildings, though, are showing that growth that we're looking to see. This slide kind of gives you some of that statistical background in how iReady as a measurement tool gauges growth. So basically they take how a student does in the fall and how they do on that next benchmark in the winter, and they compare it to what the norms of the test suggest are typical growth. And it gives us a percentage. I won't dive into this anymore, but if you want to go back and read through it, if you have any questions, let us know. But we are using that typical growth for the year to help gauge progress towards our district goals. So these were the goals that we had set at the beginning of the year. We're looking to see that at least 90% of our students, K-6, will at least achieve that annual growth target across assessments through iReady in both the areas of math and in reading. The next slide.
Similarly, in grade 7 through 12, these are the performance indicators that were shared in the fall. In 7th and 8th grade, for students that are in 7th and 8th grade taking the reading tests on iReady, and for all of those students that are in math courses that are not those that provide high school credit, via iReady, they will have the annual typical growth calculated. For students that are enrolled in high school credit math courses, particularly algebra, geometry, and for our ELA 10 students, we instead transitioned from growth model to proficiency relative to the end of course assessment. And so we do have some mid-year progress that we will share momentarily about that.
Okay, the next 2 slides kind of give us a sneak peek into how kids are doing in terms of meeting that annual typical growth target. So this slide shows you what percentage of students at each grade level for math have already met their annual typical growth. So iReady gives us an annual typical growth, and then it gives us a stretch growth metric as well. Looking at, you know, each grade level, we already have kids who are at that annual typical growth and now are working toward that stretch growth. And again, remember, annual typical growth is meant to be achieved over the course of the whole year. So these are students who are kind of ahead of that curve. The next slide shows you the exact same thing for reading.
in terms of percentage of kids who are already at that annual growth target.
So then in algebra, looking at our middle school students and our high school students, the combined 7-12 math department has created quarterly common assessments, which this year are reflecting mastery of different standards. And so you see that all of the questions listed at the top of this chart and the percentage of students that earned credit for each of those. So those are quarterly assessments that are given for students. This is our first year giving those. So right now we don't have any predictive information as to if you score a certain percentage, what that might mean relative to proficiency on the end of course, but is incredibly useful data, not only for the department to use to decide on reteaching strategies that are needed, but also for individual teachers to provide interventions for small groups of students or individual students. Similarly here, you can see Q2. So this will be super helpful after we have a year under our belt to use these for predictive proficiency as well. Similarly here, you see for geometry that we have it not only for the middle school students enrolled, but for the high school for Q1 and also for Q2. And then for English 2, which is the English end of course that is currently offered by the ODE, you can see that that was administered as well to students, but that is a semesterly exam. So students have only taken one of these thus far. The same standards will be assessed on the second semester assessment. So we will be able to have growth information after that second data point is collected. You can see that there are 3 standards. Remember that our standards are banded in high school and ELA, so this is a 9-10 standard. These will be assessed again, so they're still in progress relative to teaching. But these are things that have been flagged by the department as to, how are we teaching this and what needs to be further refined. But it's great information. Similarly, since this is our first year of giving these common assessments, for future note, we will be able to have predictive information relative to proficiency on the end of course for students as they test throughout the year. So, any questions?
So Becky and Jen, that's a lot of great data. If you were to give an executive level summary of where we're at on achievement of the goal, what would be the takeaways that you would want the board to know?
I would say that I feel like we have a really good handle on our data and strengths and weaknesses in each of these grade levels and each of these content areas. Jen, I don't know if you want to say anything about that.
I think I would say that, given the year that we've had with education, I'm pleasantly surprised that we are not significantly behind where we typically are this year. There are still some areas to watch. There's still some, as Becky said, some weaknesses. Those grade levels and content areas that we've worried about in the past, we still worry about a little bit. But overall, I'd say we're on track, but we need to continue to carefully watch how things are going.
Are there any other changes besides COVID that contributed to the data for math at the middle school, or does that align with, do you feel like that's typical for what we see from the middle school? I understand all the and issues, but okay.
Yeah, Becky, I mean, you can pipe in too, but I don't feel, Sharon, that it's significantly lower than it has been in the past.
Yeah, and just always remember we have this conversation annually. You've got the majority of our students are accelerated into algebra or geometry, so you're dealing with a smaller pool of students in 7th, 8th, and 8th grade that are taking these assessments.
Which is great if there's tremendous growth with students, because it's such a small number that their impact is so much greater on the percentages. it's unfortunate that we don't have state test data from last year, because then we could follow cohorts of students, but having iReady is super helpful for us.
That was the other question I was going to ask. The way the state breaks the data down into the different, I think it's 4 cohorts of students. Can we back into, are you looking at this data at that level, or do you need another year of state testing in order to be able to facilitate that?
Are you talking about value added?
No, they
Like-
have subsets of student categories within.
Oh,
Like advanced, accelerated, limited, basic.
right.
And so we
So
can equate these numbers to that at the other side if we wanted to do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, you can go in on the benchmarking and, you know, through lots of different ways of analyzing the data, you can look at where those students, what band on the Ohio test those students would be projected to fall into.
Okay, the band. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's what I was looking for.
Similarly, with the common assessments that were created in math and ELA, both of our coaches have taken the test specs that are released from the state as to, you know, what percentage is connected to this content area or this standard. And so they've kind of replicated that on these common assessments, even down to the points that are awarded for each question. And then they've taken some of the release test items that have come from previous year end of course exams. So I feel like it's a very relevant experience for our students. So it should really help us to predict in the future how students will do.
So this is a lot of numbers to come at the Board of Education. So certainly take some time to digest it. If you have any other specific questions, just kind of let us know. I'll use the word, Becky, Jen, thank you for unpacking the data for us. Had to come out at least once. You know, I think overall, this is this sends a pretty strong message on the quality of what our teachers were able to do throughout all of this craziness to keep students on track. We are, you know, there are a few blips in the radar that we are concerned about. We are identifying, we're trying to put together summer programming and interventions. I'll probably talk more about that, you know, at a future board meeting along with Governors DeWine order on that. But we are looking at interventions and supports to have help over the summer and then potentially come back in the fall to address any achievement gaps. But by and large, we're pretty happy with where students are from an achievement perspective after all they've been through. So, you know, hats off to the students and to the teachers that have worked so tremendously hard. And Jen and Becky, thank you for being here tonight.
Sure, our pleasure.
Just a quick update, and then I will turn it back over to Mr. Rankin. We talked last meeting about transitioning our elementary students, or at least giving our elementary parents an option to return to school at the end of the trimester. We went ahead and gathered that data. So in a case 6, about 126 students that were virtual, 34 of those students have decided to come back to in-person learning at the end of the trimester, which is the first week of March. And, you know, where we're at with it today, I said it could potentially be an additional teacher, an additional aide. We believe we're going to need that additional aide. We're not sure that we'll need that additional teacher. So the numbers that we talked about originally, as I said at the last meeting, were conservative. Hopefully we'll be able to staff this. I know Rachel's working through that this week. So just to give you the board an update that is moving forward and will be in place for our students that want to return at the trimester. Any questions there?
I would just applaud the staff and the administration for making that work. I know it's not a small feat, and we've asked for such a great degree of flexibility and commitment, and our staff just steps up every single time. This is something I think is really important to parents and students, but I recognize and acknowledge it's not easy. So thank you to everybody involved for making this happen. I think it is the best thing for our kids.
Absolutely. Okay, Mr. Rankin, that concludes my report.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next, we are going to move on to board report. Item 9A, I believe if Carol, there she is. If Carol's here, I think I'm going to hand over the meeting to her to give us an update on the survey of the superintendent profile.
Carol, you're muted.
Thank you. I've been on this all day and you never can expect that you're going to mute. So good evening. And it was really a pleasure to be here. You should be very proud of your staff and your community and you as board members for the number of people that have participated in filling out the school superintendent search profile. And again, for those that are joining us by live streaming, I am Carol Oxley. I am one of the 2 leads for the K-12 business consulting that's assisting the board with doing your search for the next superintendent. And Mike, if you can advance to the next, thank you very much. What we learned is that we had 218 surveys completed, which was wonderful. We had 123 participants that met with us virtually, and those were across 7 different groups. The groups, as you well know, were community stakeholders, both internal and external, a parent or public group, your administrators, your support staff, the board. We met individually with each of the board members to get input. So there was a great turnout of staff, and especially your teachers. Your students were amazing. So we appreciated all their input. If you can keep moving forward, perhaps with the whole slide, Mike, that would be great. Just for those of you that are joining us by live streaming and maybe did not see the survey, there were 3 questions. Number 1, what are the strengths of Chagrin Falls? Number 2, what are the challenges that we are facing as a district? And number 3, what are the characteristics that we should look for in our next superintendent? Dr. Hunt, I want you to know that you did not make that very easy. They identified big shoes being filled. So in our report, what we did is we gathered the information, and then where everything becomes consistent across multiple groups of people and stakeholders, those become the consistent themes. And on our next slide, we will see that identifies some of the strengths of Chagrin Falls. It absolutely prides itself across all groups on academic excellence and achievement. The other piece that really stood out to Tom and myself was the fact that you have provided individualized curriculum. It was mentioned over and again that technology was already in their hands and ready to go before you even knew COVID was going to hit. So that was wonderful. They talked, of course, about the teachers, the administrators, and the staff, that they are talented, dedicated. As a matter of fact, your high school principal said, teachers never say no. They don't even know how to say no. So it was a wonderful compliment to all the work that's being done in the district. Then our next point, number 3, it is a destination school district because it does enjoy, as you all well know, parental and community support. That support, as they discussed over and over again, a 69% passage of that levy during a time of COVID, it allows new facilities, programming for students, and there's a very proactive engagement in the schools. These are one, and we have a few more too on the strengths of the district, actually quite a few. Relationships and how important that piece is at all levels within the organization and also throughout the community. I thought it was phenomenal, Dr. Hunt, that students said you can call them by name. What a compliment to the kind of relationships that are being built. There were many strengths of the district. It certainly makes it a tremendous selling point for people that are interested in coming into Chagrin Falls as your next superintendent. Some of the takeaways are people are very vested in Chagrin Falls, very vested. Administrators and staff are very visible, they're very involved, and they build very strong relationships. Students felt like everyone really cared about them. Quite a compliment. So as we move on to a few more of the challenges now that would face the district, as good as we are, we always know that there is some opportunity for improvement, and that would be primarily the fact that the strategic plan has been started and people have been involved in it, which is quite a compliment, but it needs to be revisited and kind of get a restart, having gone through the whole COVID piece now. And this was mentioned quite a few times. Another piece that was mentioned as a challenge, which I know wants you to find someone very connected to the State Department and to the organizations that lead in the state, because funding from the state is limited in your particular area. And there is a reliance on the residential taxes with limited commercial revenue. So that is another challenge of the district. Again, as many districts, point 3, managing the effects of COVID and addressing how to continue to move forward in a positive direction that engages all the students and the families. There have been lots of compliments to how this has gone so far, and they don't want it to be anything that is less than what it already is, if that makes sense. They want it to continue to move forward. Additional challenges would be that there is the need. We just heard Dr. Cooper speaking. I was very grateful to hear her talking about the work that's being done on the diversity, inclusion, the justice, and the equity. And this did come across in many of the areas as a real need to find out how can this community address anything within themselves that might be inhibiting people choosing to come into this, whether through job application or families moving in. So that also came across as a challenge of which you, as you've demonstrated, you're already working on. The pandemic has resulted in increased social and emotional concerns for students, for staff, perhaps even families. And they just talked about the idea maybe of some wellness initiatives and being mindful that COVID has taken a toll on some students that haven't been able to be as engaged as what they might like to be because of the natural restraints from the pandemic. Then came the point of reviewing the facility plans. Blessed to have new buildings, but also they want to take a look. Your elementary building was mentioned quite a few times, and just kind of looking at the capital improvements and seeing where the district would go next. So those were some of the challenges. The takeaways there were the fact that it came across a couple of the groups that they wish that we can continue to grow our own. The idea that they certainly don't want to be looking for another superintendent very quickly, but the desire would be that perhaps even from within their own district, they would have people step up that would be interested in actually leading the district. So the idea of growing our own. The messaging to the district to remain clear and consistent, that needs to continue. There are avenues where they feel as if they have the message very clearly and everyone wants to have the same message that's being delivered. So that's an area. Clarity on state mandates versus district initiatives. I mean, the students were the ones that were so eager to talk about why do we have to follow all these state mandates, but there are a few that we do have to follow. And so just more clarity on what actually is what we have to do for the state and what do we do just because we want to continue to improve. Another point was just respecting the role of each group and trusting them to be able to execute their own positions. That always happens at different levels. Teachers, administrators, support staff, everyone wants to feel as if they can just move forward and execute what they're doing, and everyone will trust that that will get completed and done efficiently and correctly. All right, the big one, characteristics for your next leader. They want someone who is strong, transparent, a communicator, and an active listener. There were so many descriptors that probably were reflections of what's being done right now that they don't want to fall by the wayside. When they spoke about strong, they spoke about what a wonderful community this is, and there are many voices, and the people that come forth to discuss their ideas want to be able to receive communication that is scientifically based and data driven, and they want to know that they were listened to. They want that to all continue. And you as board members probably understand completely what that means. They want their voice to be heard as it has been, and they don't want anything to change with that. They want a visionary superintendent who can continue to build the trust and the positive school culture. They want a successful school leader who can communicate a vision for the district and is able to get in there and take that strategic plan, put in some measurable goals with it, and continue to move the work that's already started forward. On our next slide, we see that they're looking for a humble educator who will collaborate with and unify the staff and the community just to continue to move the academic achievement forward. Again, on 5, we see the word strong. They, I guess, as we all know, when you're a superintendent, when you're in positions of leadership, you get challenged. And sometimes the challenging and the ideas are simply, they're good ideas. It's just you have to step back and make that decision to continue to move forward. And they want that done as it has been, with integrity, honesty, empathy, and someone who is continually building that respect. Very visible in the district. Dr. Hunt has set a path already for that, and they don't want any of that to fall along the wayside. As number 6 says, someone who nurtures and fosters a strong community and business partnerships. It was over and over again that the different groups talked about the strength of the volunteers, the strength of partners just stepping up. And if they see there's a need, they immediately will not only financially, but with their own presence, support what needs to be done. So on the next page, these are our rankings. Now, as we all know, these rankings were based upon Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt had 25 characteristics, and they had to go in a number from 1 to 10. So the beauty about the open-ended questions that K-12 uses is that you get your thoughts no matter what. And as you well know here, now they're forced to make their decisions on what they're going to pick. And Tom Ash had a great way of describing, pick your top 3 and then pick your bottom 3. So what we saw is that with this forced ranking, the number 1 piece was that ability and willingness to deal fairly with faculty, staff, students, and parents. And that was virtually almost across the board from all of the categories that we interviewed, all the different groups. They just feel that fairness, they don't want anything to fall back. They want to keep moving forward as they have been. Again, tying in with the strategic plan, they want someone that can continue to implement the vision for the district. They're desiring the strong interpersonal and those public relations skills that have been the backbone of Chagrin Falls. I mean, I guess they said, Dr. Hunt, that you were just about everywhere. So it's just a wonderful testimony to the relationship that has been built throughout this community. The community just seems so supportive, and in managing that and making sure that goes in the right direction is critical. They are looking for someone effective at both written and verbal communication. That came across quite a few of the groups as a real need here, that you have people and parents that you serve that expect to have written and verbal communication, they want it to be presented very clearly. The next element, successful experience as a superintendent. As you can see, it fell about 5th when we did the averages. And they also talked about successful experience as a leader. So there was a mixture of response to that, but they clearly want someone that can demonstrate that they have managed people in the past and they can give examples of where they have been very visible in their own environments. And the bottom 5 characteristics, which I don't necessarily think are necessarily the bottom. That's what's become so hard about this. But in the order of the averages, it was these pieces. Quite a compliment to Ashley. Fiscal management expertise came like 9th because I think they believe they have a treasurer that can work right with the superintendent and move things forward. Some expressed, though, that they really do want a superintendent that certainly understands fiscal. And I know that the last one might seem to be a little out of position for people, but that was over and over again. They said, this is very important to us, but right now we are developing this and we want someone to take us into the future with this. So those were our rankings. I'm going to give you an opportunity here I'm going to give you a few final thoughts and then see what kinds of questions you might have. My takeaway, what an enviable reputation you have, not only in the region, but across the state. You really are a destination district. I thought this was so well said. You have a small town feel, but you have big school opportunities. When I listened to your wonderful students, they were so articulate and so bright. And they talked about the fact that if they decided that they wanted a club and they had enough people to back that club, that it was like an open venue for them. If they did exactly what they were supposed to do, they could form those pieces that probably would only be in big school opportunities. But because of your dedication, your teachers, your administrators, you get all those opportunities, but you still have that small town feel where everyone knows who you are and calls you by name. Someone compared it to Cheers. Large participation rate in those extracurricular activities. They talked about everything from your beautiful arts to the sports, to your clubs, all kinds of your advanced, your all pieces were all well represented, and they were very proud of all the offerings that are available for them. Staff and students are of high quality, and they support each other as well as help each other. The one thing that your student body begged me to say, so I need to say this again in front of everyone, they really want to continue to have a voice. They want a leader who will really honor their voice and continue to meet with them and get input from them. They are strong. They are such a bright future for your community. And their voice now is saying, just continue to give us a chance to be heard. It was very powerful. So in short, the Chagrin Falls Exempted Village School District has an exemplary reputation and is held in very high regard. It was really a pleasure to get to talk to not only you individually as board members, but your teachers, your parents, your stakeholders, your administrators. It was a wonderful 2 days. And I want to thank whoever suggested that we move to 2 days, because we wanted to do that for all of you. And having 218 surveys really gave us a cross section of what we thought the district was looking for. So questions from you, something you want me to clarify? What can I help you with here?
Well, those are all very, very good words and very good feedback on the district. Definitely a strong vote on Bob's history, but it's all very good and very true. But if you could almost, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of the best way to get this, but maybe if you could think of all those comments that you got, if you can almost construct an avatar, if I may, but it's not Bob, what would it be like? I mean, you described it several different ways.
I think that when I am speaking to recruits, the first thing I'm going to say to them is, this staff is extremely dedicated. You have a community that only wants for you to be successful, and you need to build relationships. I think the relationships are critical. It doesn't mean that they have to be, excuse me, Dr. Hunt, just like Dr. Hunt. I mean, you don't have to be just like that, but you have to let people know that you are really listening to them. You have a community that wants to be listened to. You have students that want to be listened to, and you have teachers that want to be listened to, and staff. And I think that that is really important in your next superintendent. Taking the time. Many of you mentioned that you want the person to take the time. This is a district that doesn't have fires every day. This is a district that can continue to move forward on their already good work. I never heard from anyone, get in here and change anything. I heard, come here, keep it moving forward, but keep it exactly that, moving up and forward. And don't forget about the identified middle student and anyone that has any kind of special needs along the way. We want all children to be represented and listened to, and all families.
That was beautifully stated. I agree with you, Carol. I think that to convey to our potential candidates that we are a district that is moving in a very positive direction with no gaping holes or, gaping issues, that certainly not compared to what many school districts are facing. And we're looking for somebody to continue that strong trend, and also recognize that there's an investment of time in building those relationships. We're not looking for somebody to come in and make changes right away or fix any big problems. It's a matter of really getting invested in the district and understanding, and then helping us make it to that next level.
Absolutely. And I can't even explain to you how genuinely easy it is going to be for me to sell your district. I just believe that with all my heart, because we're selling a great district with a lot of support and a lot of involvement, and the pathway is there. We just don't want to go backwards. We want to keep moving forward. So if I know your time is limited, I am always here. Catherine either gives me the message, or you can call me directly, or anything I can do. We're very excited. I just had 3 completed applications just within the last few hours. So that was great.
Wow. Thank you, Carol, that you've done a phenomenal job, and it was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Would you just recap the next steps real quick for us? I know that this completed summary document will be made available to the public, right?
Absolutely. Mike will put that up on your own website. Thank you very much, Catherine. And we will put that up on the K-12 website. And now I will circle back to probably the 30 people, I'm not finished yet, that I've reached out to recruits, and I will put that survey right into their hands. I've already given them the application and the brochure, but now I'm going to put the survey right in their hands, and then I will set a time up as I continue now to recruit. I will follow up on the ones I've reached out to and make sure that they have this information, then have a follow-up conversation if they feel like they're a good fit. If they don't feel like they are in a position to move this district forward, I would rather not have them even apply, to be honest. You don't need that. You need great candidates. So And
Thank
so
you.
those are our next steps, and the final applications for anyone listening tonight, because sometimes we will have, well, I'm not sure on this, how you're doing this, if it's by invitation, but we will have candidates that will want to sit in and listen to some of the board meetings and see whether they feel like it's a good fit or not. And so those applications are due March 11th. That will be the next big deadline for us.
So all of our board meetings are on our YouTube channel to be viewed, at least since the time we started taping them and broadcasting them this way. And then on our school website, anybody who's interested in the timeline or any of the materials related to the superintendent search, it's all there. And of course, if you had any specific questions, you could call central office as well, and we'll get you, the information. But it'll outline what our next steps are and when we're going to start doing interviews. And then as a reminder, many of our community members and parents may be asked to come in again at the final interview stage and meet with our candidates. They'll have an opportunity to talk to them, or our final two candidates, ask them questions, and many people will be involved in that process as well. So I really appreciate the way that I think it reflects the way we like to do things as a district, that we really do incorporate that genuine input from a lot of different stakeholders. It's not just the Board of Education making a decision in a vacuum. And Carol, thank you for facilitating that with our community.
We've mentioned it in the different groups that if there was someone that they should contact you, if there's someone that they want to go on. And the first round of interviews will be on March the 29th and then March 31st, with your final interviews for anyone listening, April 13th and 14th, with hopefully, or with a decision on April 15th, whatever the board decides there. And
Yeah.
I just have to add one more little piece, because during the course of the conversations, we've talked a lot about your diversity group, about that community group. And I heard Dr. Cooper mention that she had gotten a phone call, and I'm hoping that it came out of the other community meetings, because we're trying to align everything and make sure, please get involved in all these different things, because this is very important to move the district forward. So.
Hey, before you leave, Carol, one thing I did want to make sure and point out, I know it wasn't in your slide deck, but it is in the report, at page 8, and we talked about how, across the different groups of stakeholders, and I always love the data, I like to see it. So, and I believe this, but it was good to see in the data across the board, the admin, the teachers, support staff, parents, community, and students. I mean, if you looked at what we each ranked 1 through 10, I was struck at how similar they were, which is good. I mean, it means that we don't have a single group or a couple groups that are kind of like the board isn't disconnected from the parents, which aren't disconnected from the students, and teachers and so on and so forth. I was very pleased to see that we all had, not identical, but very similar rankings on what is the forced ranking importance of 1 to 10. I thought that was really striking.
Thank you very much. It was absolutely, that's a notable mention. Thank you, Phil. Appreciate that. Because it was. And that is exactly what you heard. You didn't hear, you are so right. Sometimes you hear such variations. You think, oh gosh, is this the same district? It wasn't like that at all. Consistent. There's a few variables, but nothing major, nothing at all, which makes it a great spot for your next superintendent.
Very good. Thank you, Carol.
Okay, thank you. Take care.
All right. Now we move on to audience community participation. I know I've had nobody contact me wishing to speak to the board. Have you, Mrs. Brudno?
I have not.
Dr. Hunt?
I have not either.
Okay. Well, if anybody would like to, I'd encourage you to reach out to any one of the three of us, or anybody on the board if you'd like to get on the agenda. Moving on, If I could have a motion for consent agenda item 7A through 7D.
So moved.
Thank you, Greg. And a second.
I'll second it.
Any discussion of the items there?
These are pretty standard. I would say B and C, those are additional hours related to services needed for student on individualized education plan.
Okay. Great. Anyone else? All right, Ms. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Burrows,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right, next, if I could have a motion for superintendent's recommendation 8A through 8D.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. And a second.
I'll second.
Greg. Dr. Hunt.
Yes, item A is a resignation. Megan actually was offered a pay increase to their current employer, so she decided to stay. Item B is the employment of Caitlin McPheron. Caitlin has been filling in, and just per the CFEA contractor, after so many days, you go up into a level 1 for the teacher scale, so not an additional position. Item C is a recommendation to make John Scott the head football coach for the school district. John has served in the district as a social studies teacher and coach for many years. And he's certainly excited about the opportunity if approved tonight. And item D is a agreement with Sodexo operations. And just to clarify, we did move away from Sodexo from a management perspective, but we spent a lot of time putting all of our facility needs into VFA. It has been really a good planning tool for us, and they're able to leverage better pricing than we could get out on our own. So we have continued to contract with them for the VFA software. So it's a recommendation to continue that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other discussion? All right, Mrs. Brudno, if you'd please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Burrows,
Yes.
Mr. Kanziger,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right. If I could have a motion for treasurer's recommendation 9A.
So moved.
Thank you, Sharon. And second.
I'll
I'll
second. Oh, is that you, Mary Kay?
Go ahead, Catherine.
Catherine got it.
Yeah.
All right, Mrs. Brudno.
Okay, can you see that? What I just shared?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Okay, not a whole lot to point out for January. Hold on, let me make these a little bit bigger. This is kind of hard to see. There, that looks better. January activity, our revenue coming in for general property taxes. This is down from what the original estimate was. So you'll notice that the February will go up from previous years. This is not because our taxes are down. Collection is down slightly, but this is just one of the advances that in the previous years came in January that now is coming in February. So it's just a timing issue mostly. The $178,000 here is advances in. That's returning the advances that we made at the end of the year last year. It's just returning those back to the general fund. Employee benefits, you'll notice, went up. This is because we are moving into the new plan year on the health insurance, and we did have an increase there. So that is explained mostly by that. Okay, looking at revenue in general, I pointed out most of what there is to discuss on the previous report, but again, the advances in I think in the previous year, we returned those in December. So if you're comparing year to year, you'll notice a little bit of a fluctuation there just because, honestly, I just forgot to do it in December. But they did get returned in January. Moving to expenditures for the general fund. Again, nothing, too exciting to note. If you were comparing, if I included the December column here, on the benefits, the medical, you would see the medical went up from December, again, due to the increase for the calendar year and the new plan. But overall, we're right around 50% of our total estimate. So we're tracking right where we should be. And this is just the remainder of those expenditures. Comparing our month to month here, revenue is down slightly compared to previous years in January. Again, we're missing an advance here that will come in February, so we should pick up there. State revenue is, I know we've kind of talked about this one quite a lot. State revenue was down significantly. Then we got some of it restored. We found out recently that the final numbers are in, and we are expecting our revenue for state money to be restored even more. We're not back totally to where we began before COVID, but the hit is not as significant. So the way they do the state funding, they give us 2 payments a month. They take the total estimate and divide it among those payments. So now our payments from here on for the rest of the fiscal year will go up because our total went up. So those payments are going to go up, and then by the end of the year, we will be at our annual amount, which is still slightly lower than before COVID, but not nearly as bad as we thought it was in the beginning. Expenditures, you can see, we are down from the previous fiscal year. This is consistent with our commitment and all of the cuts that we made to get us down to the 3.85 mils. Initially, recall that we needed more than that to get us to a levy cycle that we desired and not have to ask for more. We cut expenditures. So you can see that right there demonstrating we're making good on our promise there. This is a new report. I, for now, will be including this every month because this is something that I know the board is interested in keeping an eye on. This is new. The self-insurance fund starting in January, obviously we began with 0 because it did not exist until January. Total contributions for the month, going forward, I'll just include the current month and then the fiscal total. I'll probably, once we get moving on this and we have some history, I'll provide some comparisons, but right now we don't have anything to compare to. But here's our expenditures, and then our balance at the end of January was almost $51,000. So not too bad for our first month. And that's expected because claims that are coming through in January are a lot of it is going to be for December, things that happened in December. So those items that happened in December, those claims are still going to go to Medical Mutual on our fully insured plan. So the first few months, we won't expect our claims to be very high. Claims will go up. Don't, if in a couple months you say, Ashley, claims went from 22,000 to 60, why is that? It's because right now these claims are only a very small portion of what our claims are, because most of what gets billed in January was for December items, and those are still going to MedMutual. So that will pick up. Any questions on the self-insurance? I know, try to present it as simply as possible.
Ashley, thank you to you and your team for facilitating that transition. I know that took a lot of work, but I am expecting the payback to be significant to the district.
That's the goal. Okay, moving to the FinSum report by fund. You'll see the self-insurance fund. This is obviously new, started at 0. We do have some funds with negative cash fund balances. Nothing too, unexpected. The 300 fund is our athletics. This is where we moved all the expenditures into the 300 fund out of the general fund for those. And then at the end of the year, we'll make that transfer. And then the federal grant funds, as always, we spend that money first, and then they give us the money. So those kind of always run in the red. And then the bank reconciliation, nothing exciting to point out. Oops. This is where our money is. Unfortunately, Star yield has dipped down into what our normal bank accounts are. Hopefully these interest rates will pick up someday. And then where our investments are with Red Tree, and these obviously all have higher yields, but these are not quite as liquid. We are going to, given the cash balance that we have now, and since we did pass the levy, I've spoken to our investment manager. We are going to start moving a little bit more money into these managed accounts, just to kind of make a little bit more on our cash that we're holding right now. And then we'll schedule out a plan so that we always have enough liquid to do what we need to do. Any questions on any of these reports?
Nope.
Okay. Then I'm recommending your approval.
Okay, if you would please take the roll.
Mr. Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right. Any other business? All right. Seeing none. Our next meeting will be March 3rd at 6 p.m. via video conference here on Zoom once again on YouTube. Mrs. Garvey, if you'd like to make a motion.
Sure. In accordance with Ohio Revised Code 121.22, the Chagrin Falls Board of Education will go into executive session for the sole purpose of the consideration of the following matter: preparing for, conducting, or reviewing negotiations or bargaining sessions with public employees concerning their compensation or other terms and conditions of their employment.
If we could have a second.
I will
Second.
second that.
All right, Mary Kay. And Mrs. Brudno, if you'd like to take
Mr.
a roll.
Rankin,
Yes.
Mrs. Garvey,
Yes.
Mrs. Bros,
Yes.
Mr. Kanzinger,
Yes.
Mrs. O'Toole.
Yes.
All right, and we expect no further actions before the adjournment of the meeting.